Of course. I'm Patrick Horvath. I'm the cartoonist of Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, and I'm a filmmaker, cartoonist based in Los Angeles, California. So I started making comic books when I was very young, like even 4 or 5. I would make these like single page panel comics that I mean, they were basically comics of telling a story through the pages of like very simple, you know, stories like having a tea party at the monster house and like all the monsters are coming together and they come to the Dracula's house and have a tea party or things like that. Very silly, very small. And my mom would help me like type out the scenario at the bottom, you know, and then I ended up in my teenage years making comics on my own just for fun, for friends to read. Very small, again. I never thought about having a job and career in comics at all. And then I ended up actually focusing on film for like a long time. From like, you know, 1998 until almost like 2011, like just film exclusively. And I would read comics, but in terms of making them, again, I never really thought about it until after my second film that I made in Los Angeles. After it, I really wanted to do something creative, but it takes so long to make movies that I wanted to do something smaller. And I was like, oh, I miss drawings. I used to draw quite a bit, especially as a child, up until through high school. And then I stopped when I started focusing on film. So I started drawing again and doing watercolor, and I really enjoyed it. And after a year of that, I realized like if I could get better at drawing, and maybe I could do comics and like actually make something that could be published, and then there could be a way to also do storytelling that didn't require a whole, you know, group of people to make a movie, you know. And so that's kind of when I had the idea of like going into comics. And so that was like 2012, 2013. And then it wasn't until like 2018, 2017 that I felt ready to actually get something published. And in between then, I was doing a lot of zines and self-published things, or working for authors who were doing their own self-published work, like Josh Trujillo. And then as time went on and I kept posting my art up, some people started looking at it, and eventually I did the interiors for an issue of Ha Ha by W. Maxwell Prince, who also writes his comic Ice Cream Man. And so I did that number 4 issue of Ha Ha, all the interior art. It was the first time it had been published by a major publisher. And then shortly after that, I had an opportunity to pitch ideas to IDW, and one of those became Beneath the Trees. So Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees follows this small little town of Woodbrook that's populated by a bunch of cute animal people, like anthropomorphic animals. Very much like a children's book. They're very cute. It's a very quaint town. They're very innocent. There's also a bear who lives there, who owns the hardware shop, and she is also a serial killer, and she's been living there amongst them for decades. Doing as she pleases because she is very careful about how she does her killing. She only kills in the big city. She never kills in the small town. And unfortunately, something comes up. There's a revelation in town that throws everything upside down and threatens to discover, you know, with more attention, like what Samantha the bear has been up to. Well, I knew that, so this all came, the idea for the book literally came from a one drawing I was doing during this period of doing drawings every day. And it was, I drew a bear walking down a hillside, like an anthropomorphic bear, with an axe on their shoulder, and it was bloody. And I thought immediately, like, there was a series of children's books in the States done by a creator named Richard Scarry. And he had, like, this is around the 1960s, I think, 1970s. But he created this town called Busy Town. And it's very cute and quaint, and there's a bunch of anthropomorphic animals that live there. And they're mostly books to help learn vocabulary words for children and stuff. But I was like, what if there was a serial killer in Busy Town, was my first thought. And then, and I just loved the idea immediately because it felt like it should, it would be like blasphemous. Like it felt wrong, you know, but in a good way. And also in the States, we have this old song called The Teddy Bear's Picnic. And the chorus in the song is, beneath the trees where nobody sees, they hide and seek as long as they please. And so And the title is Teddy Bear's Pics. It's what the teddy bears do when no one's watching, right? And I always thought it was sinister. Like I always thought, like, what do they do beneath the trees where nobody sees? Like I always thought that. So as soon as I came up with that idea, I was like, oh yeah, it'd be a serial killer bear, and it would be called Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. Like that's perfect. I love it. So that's on. So she had to be a bear. And for the rest, I mostly wanted to play with the stereotype that we have for that certain animal. So like for Charlie, he's a mole or a taupe, and he's like, he has really bad eyesight, and which is great for Samantha because he can't necessarily read all of the inventory, so he doesn't know what's missing or whatever because she's using it for for her killing, you know, and things like that. I feel like there's a character, Cherry Gherkins, who's a pig. She's very pushy piggy to me, and I feel like that plays into it. But then there's other characters that I'm playing against where you might think they're very meek, but they're actually very strong. And so I like to play around with it a little bit. And I feel like it's the same. It's funny because it's a trope that we have just based on stereotypes of those animals. But then also there's tropes within the horror genre that I'm also playing with that I feel like it's funny because it's all part of the same grammar, it seems like. As soon as they told me they were interested in the book, I outlined the whole book with all of the different beats of the story, just on like a couple sentences for each moment. And once at that point, that's how I paced out the book for the most part. And then I sat down and just started writing the first issue, and then I drew the first issue immediately after, and then I wrote issues 2 through 5 just to get a big chunk of it out and for my editors to read it. And then once we were through that, I started doing all the art for 2 through 5. And then I got to the final issue for 6, and then I wrote that out and then I drew it, like one right after the other, just like the first issue, which was interesting because I felt like I'd come around like on a long journey, you know what I mean? Like by the time you get to the last one. So it was kind of, it changed throughout. But I very much need to know the whole story. Like I had that outline that had the whole story first. And it's very important for me to know the whole story. I do a very bad job of storytelling if I'm discovering it as I'm writing it, because it can take me forever to, you explore a thing, and if it doesn't work, then you have to be able to just not be precious and get rid of it for the better of the story. And I can't afford that time. So, and I've written whole screenplays before that I like that, where I just discover the story as I write it. And I've written it'll be a couple hundred pages, and I'll be like, and then you just spent all this time, and it just feels like a sort of a less efficient way to do storytelling. You probably could figure it out if you just came up with the beats and thought about it, you know what I mean? I still have moments that I discover as I'm actually writing in between the beats, But for the most part, I need to have a roadmap. Yes, I've already begun a second volume. It's going to take place 8 years after, in the same town, with the same characters. But now this first volume is set during the 1980s. So the second volume, 8 years later, will be the 1990s. And with that comes the internet, also corporate land development for suburbs. So they're cutting down some forest and building suburban homes. Also, we have those big box stores, like Walmart and so on, that in the 1980s, especially in the United States, a lot of those big box stores showed up, and all the small town business went away because nobody was going there anymore. So those are all the elements. That's the setting that Samantha finds herself in the second volume. Oh man, what a good question. Who would I choose and why? You know what? I would choose. I'm a huge fan of Manuele Fiore, who's an Italian cartoonist who has worked in France for quite a bit, and then I believe has since gone back to Italy. 5,000 kilometers per hour was a big book from him. Celeste was another big book, and Hypericum in the States is what it's called. He has a very effective mode of art that is it's all gouache, which I find very liberating. I use ink and gouache, and that's the style that I'm going to continue using for Beneath the Trees. But yeah, I have hopes to move to gouache because it is so flexible. As I understand it, he was a architect, or he was studying to be an architect for quite a while, and then moved to doing BD. So I just would love to be able to have a peek at how he sees the world, because his sense of structure and space and also color and light is incredible. And also his economy of storytelling is incredible. As I understand it, he's a type of artist who does discover the story as it comes. Okay. And I find it fascinating. So I would love to get a peek into his head to see his creative process.